There's a specific kind of silence that doesn't feel like quiet. It feels like pressure. Like the moment before something cracks, not breaks, cracks, and you can hear the fault line before anyone else in the room even notices it exists. That was Sunday dinner at my parents' house. That was the silence that followed the question I'd been holding in my chest since Thursday. I'd been putting off asking because I already knew, somewhere in the part of me that had learned to know things before they were confirmed. The part that had spent 29 years in that house, and then the years after, still orbiting it, reading the air the way other people read words. I set my fork down on the edge of my plate. My brother was across from me, helping himself to more roasted potatoes. My mother was refilling her water. My father was looking at his phone. "Did anyone pick up my prescription?" I asked. "The one I called in Thursday? The pharmacist said it was ready Friday morning." My father didn't look up right away. That half second, that beat, told me everything. "Oh," my mother said. Not answering, just the sound of someone buying time. "We didn't get a chance," my father said. He set his phone face down. "It's been a busy week." I nodded slowly. I picked my fork back up. I cut a piece of chicken I had no intention of eating. "Okay," I said. "Which pharmacy did you end up going to? Because I can call ahead. Make sure they still have it." Another pause. My brother reached for his glass. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at me. "We went to the one on Elgin," he said, "but we didn't end up picking yours up." "Whose did you pick up?" There it was. I hadn't planned to ask it that directly, but the question had been sitting right there at the edge of everything, and suddenly I was too tired to dance around it. "Your brother's refill came in," my mother said, as if that explained it. As if the sentence was supposed to land like an answer and I'd just receive it and move on. I didn't move on. I looked at my brother. He was chewing. He didn't look up. I want to describe what happened to the air in the room, but I'm not sure I have the right words for it. It didn't get louder. It got smaller. Like the walls moved in 2 inches, and none of us acknowledged it. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I could hear the tick of the clock above the mantel that I'd been hearing my whole life without ever really listening to it. "The doctor said mine was urgent," I said. My voice was even. I was proud of that. She wrote it on the referral. "Urgent, please fill within 48 hours, and the pharmacist left a message on my phone about not missing the first dose." "We know," my father said. "We were going to go back. It's been 4 days. We've been busy, sweetheart." Sweetheart. I hadn't been called that since I was small enough that it meant something. I put my fork down again. This time I didn't pick it back up. I want to back up because this dinner, this Sunday, this roast chicken and these potatoes and this specific silence didn't come out of nowhere. It was the product of a pattern that had taken me a long time to see clearly. Not because it was hidden, but because when you grow up inside something, it's very hard to see its edges. I am the older of 2 children. My brother is 4 years younger than me. From the outside, I think our family looked ordinary. 2 parents, a house in a mid-sized Ontario city, a backyard with a maple tree that turned orange every October. My father worked in insurance for 30 years. My mother worked part-time at a dental office until she didn't need to anymore. I don't know exactly when I understood that the rules in our house were different depending on who you were. I think I was maybe 8 or 9 when I first noticed it, but I didn't have the language for it then. I just felt it, the way you feel a draft from a window that isn't quite sealed. You don't see the gap, you just feel the cold. My brother was charming in a way that worked on our parents the way a key works a lock. He was funny. He was the kind of kid who could get away with things by making someone laugh at exactly the right moment. I was not that kind of kid. I was the one who read the room and tried to take up less of it. I was the one who got good grades, not because anyone pushed me, but because I understood, without anyone saying it, that grades were the thing I could offer that my brother couldn't. I was low maintenance by design. I made myself easy so that there'd be room for him to be complicated. I moved out at 22. I came back to the city at 26 when my father had a health scare, a cardiac event that turned out to be moderate, manageable, scary looking on paper. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I'd stay 6 months, make sure they were okay, and then get back to my own life in Toronto. That was 3 years ago. I don't say that to make myself sound like a martyr. I say it because it's true, and because the truth matters in this story, and because the version of myself that existed before this dinner at this table needed someone to say it plainly. You have been here for 3 years. You have paid a third of this household's grocery bill every month. You have driven your mother to her ophthalmologist twice. You have sat with your father in the cardiology waiting room at the Queensway Carlton and held a magazine you weren't reading and tried to look calm. You have done all of this while also working full-time remotely, managing your own life, your own anxiety, your own body that including the body that is now, apparently, not urgent enough. The prescription was for a medication my neurologist had started me on after 18 months of testing. I'd had symptoms for longer than that, fatigue that didn't respond to sleep, muscle weakness on my left side that I'd been dismissing as stress, headaches that arrived like weather. My GP referred me. I waited 14 months for the specialist appointment. I got the diagnosis in November. I got the prescription in February. The neurologist's office called it a first-line treatment. They used the word important several times. The pharmacist, a woman with a very calm voice who I could tell was trying not to alarm me, said, "Please make sure you get this filled quickly. First doses matter." I had given my parents $40 in cash on Thursday. I had written the pharmacy address on a Post-it. I had texted my mother the prescription number. They spent the $40 at Costco. I don't know that for certain. Not yet, but I'm getting there. I excused myself from the table before dessert. My mother had made butter tarts. She always made butter tarts for Sunday dinner. It was the kind of detail that makes everything more surreal, the normalcy of butter tarts alongside everything else. I walked to the bathroom at the end of the hall, and I stood in front of the mirror, and I looked at my own face for a moment. I wasn't going to cry. I want to be clear about that. I was past the age of crying in my parents' bathroom about my parents. What I felt was something quieter and more settled than grief. It was the feeling of something becoming undeniable. I drove myself to the pharmacy. It was a Sunday afternoon in March, overcast, the kind of sky that can't decide between winter and spring. I drove down Bank Street and I found parking without any trouble, and I went in and I picked up my own prescription, and I paid for it with my own debit card. The pharmacist, not the same woman from the phone, was efficient and kind. She walked me through the dosage. She answered my questions. She said, "Have a good rest of your day," and I said, "You too," and I meant it. I sat in my car in the parking lot for about 10 minutes before I drove home. When I came back, my brother was on the couch watching something on his laptop with headphones on. My mother was doing dishes. My father was in his chair with the TV on low. No one asked where I'd gone. I went upstairs to my room. I put my medication on my nightstand. I opened my laptop and I stared at the screen for a while without seeing anything on it. Then I opened my banking app, the way I sometimes do when I'm trying to ground myself in something concrete. Numbers, statements, things that don't shift when you're not looking. I am a meticulous person. I was a finance minor. I have a spreadsheet for my budget the way some people have a journal. I update it weekly, sometimes more. I know exactly what I spend, where, and when. But there was one account I had not been meticulous about, because I had trusted the people it was connected to. A joint account that I'd opened with my parents when I moved back, originally meant to cover household expenses, utilities, groceries. My father had suggested it. "It'll be easier," he said. "You can transfer in your share and we'll take care of the rest." I thought it was a good idea. I was trying to make myself easy. I hadn't looked at the transaction history in a long time. I started scrolling. There were things I recognized immediately: grocery runs, the hydro bill, internet, routine, normal. And then there were things I recognized but hadn't noticed, recurring withdrawals in amounts that didn't correspond to any bill I was aware of. A transfer in October I couldn't place, one in December, 3 in January. Not large individually, $60 here, $120 there. Once in November, 240, all at once. In November, 240, all at once. I opened a new tab and made a spreadsheet. I'm someone who needs to see things laid out before I can trust what I'm looking at. Over 22 months, the amount came to just over $4,000, withdrawn in pieces small enough that I wouldn't notice, small enough that they blended in, small enough to be mistaken for ordinary household variance if you weren't paying close attention. I had not been paying close attention. I want to tell you that I felt rage. That would be a cleaner story. But what I actually felt was something much harder to name. A kind of vast, settling weight. Like the moment you understand a thing has been true for a long time and you are only now catching up to it. Not shock. Recognition. I thought about the conversation I'd had with my neurologist in November. The one where she explained that my condition was manageable with consistent treatment, that stress was one of the main aggravating factors, that having stable support structures in place made a measurable difference in outcomes. I thought about the post-it I had written, the prescription number I had texted, the $40. I thought about how tired I had been, for how long. I didn't confront anyone that night. I want to be honest about that too, because I think there's a version of this story that expects a confrontation scene, raised voices, someone slamming a door, the dramatic rupture. That's not what happened. What happened was I brushed my teeth, and I took my first dose, and I lay in the dark for a long time, thinking about what I actually wanted. I wanted to leave. Not impulsively, not in a storm. I had tried impulsive before, at 22, when I packed my car in a hurry and drove to Toronto with about $1,200 and a lot of righteous feeling that burned out by month 4. That version of leaving didn't hold. This time, I wanted to leave the way you close a door, deliberately, with both hands. I gave myself 2 weeks. It took 10 days. I found a one-bedroom apartment in Sentrytown, a building I'd been on the wait list for since before I moved back. The timing was almost absurd. A unit had opened up the week before, and I called on a Monday morning and was approved by Wednesday. When I told the landlord I could take possession by the 1st of the month, he said, "Great, see you then." And I almost laughed at how straightforward it was. The thing I'd been waiting for had been there, waiting back. I told my parents on a Thursday. I didn't make it a discussion. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd put my fork down 2 weeks before, and I said I wanted to let them know I was moving out. I'd found a place. I was taking possession March 1st. My mother asked if something was wrong. I said no. I said it was just time. My father asked if it was about money. I looked at him for a moment. He had a specific expression that I'd seen before, a kind of anticipatory defensiveness, a bracing, like someone expecting impact. I looked at the joint account, I said. I think when I move out, we should close it. I'll handle closing my portion and making sure everything is settled before the end of the month. The silence that followed was different from the one at Sunday dinner. That one had felt like pressure. This one felt like something releasing. My mother said that sounded fine. My father said okay. My brother, who was in the other room, didn't say anything at all. I went upstairs. I started packing. There were things I left behind deliberately, and things I realized I'd already let go of years ago. There was a box of books from university that had been sitting in the closet untouched. A winter coat I'd grown out of, some version of the person who had thought that being low maintenance was the same as being loved. I didn't leave a note. I didn't make a speech. On the morning of March 1st, I loaded my car in 2 trips with the help of a friend, a woman I work with who showed up at 8 in the morning with a coffee for each of us and who did not ask questions, which was exactly what I needed. We moved the last box into the new apartment at noon. She stayed for an hour. We sat on the floor and ate takeout pad thai and talked about a show we'd both been watching. It was the most ordinary afternoon, and I cannot describe how extraordinary ordinary felt. I took my medication that evening, the way I had every evening for the past 10 days. My neurologist's office had called to check in, a routine follow-up, and I told her I was stable, that I'd started the first-line treatment, that I was managing. She said that was good to hear. She asked about stress levels. Getting better, I said, and I meant it in a way I hadn't been able to mean it in a long time. My brother texted me 2 weeks after I moved out, not to check in, not to ask how I was settling. He texted to ask if I still had the login for the streaming account that had been shared across the household. I texted back that I'd removed myself from it when I left. He said, "Okay, thanks," and that was the end of the conversation. My mother called in April. It was a Sunday, which felt fitting. She asked how I was. I said fine, good, busy. She talked for a while about some renovations they were thinking of doing to the kitchen, about my father's latest checkup, about a show she'd started watching. I listened. I answered when she asked me things. At the end of the call, she said, "We miss you around here." I said I was glad they were doing well. I have thought a lot, in the months since, about why it took me so long. Not with judgment. I have made my peace with the timeline, but with genuine curiosity, because I was not someone who lacked self-awareness. I had read the books. I understood the concepts. I knew what parentification looked like, what enmeshment looked like, what it meant to perform the role of easy child as a survival strategy. I knew all of it. And I had still been in that house for 3 years, still putting my share into a joint account, still writing prescription numbers on Post-it notes for people who spent the money on other things. I think the answer is that understanding something and being ready to act on it are two different processes, and they don't always run on the same timeline. What changed at that Sunday dinner wasn't that I finally learned something I didn't know. What changed was that the thing I'd known for a long time became impossible to unknow. There's a difference. One is information. The other is a door. My neurologist told me at my 3-month follow-up that my symptom tracking was showing stabilization. She asked what I changed. I told her about the move. She nodded like this was not a surprise to her. She said living situation has a bigger effect on neurological health than people expect. She said the body keeps score even when we're not paying attention. I am paying attention now. I think about that Sunday afternoon sometimes. The pharmacy on Bank Street, the overcast sky, the 10 minutes in my car that felt like the longest 10 minutes I'd had in years, the moment of deciding to do a thing for myself because no one else was going to. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a speech that landed the way speeches land in films. It was just a woman in a parking lot, in a city where most medications are covered by provincial drug benefits once you meet your deductible, sitting with the quiet knowledge that she deserved to be treated urgently. I take my medication every evening at the same time. I reconcile my accounts every Sunday morning with a coffee and the radio on. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment where every bill is in my name and every withdrawal is one I made myself. The maple tree at my parents' house turned orange again in October. I know because I drove past it once, not on purpose, just on the way to somewhere else. I didn't stop, but I noticed it. Some things you carry with you not because they're heavy, but because they were yours first, before anything else got complicated. I kept driving. I had somewhere to be. I keep coming back to that Sunday afternoon in the parking lot on Bank Street. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't. It was just a woman sitting in her car, in the gray of a March afternoon, deciding to go get her own prescription because no one else was going to. That's the part people don't talk about enough. The quiet moments where something shifts. Not the confrontations. Not the speeches. Just a person choosing themselves, plainly, without an audience. For a long time, I thought being easy was a virtue. I thought making myself small, low maintenance, uncomplicated, I thought that was me being good. And in a way, it was. There's something genuinely decent in not wanting to be a burden, in showing up for the people around you, in keeping your word even when they don't keep theirs. I don't think I was wrong to have those values. I think I applied them in the wrong direction for too long. I was pouring everything outward and leaving nothing for the body that had to carry me through the day. The body that needed a prescription filled on a Thursday. What I've come to understand is that the life I was living had a logic to it, and the life I have now has a different logic. Both are consistent. What you give your attention to grows. What you protect survives. For 3 years, I protected a version of family harmony that wasn't real, and the cost of that showed up in a bank statement and a missed medication and a set of symptoms that were quietly getting worse while I was busy being convenient. I'm not angry about it anymore. I was, for a while, and that anger was useful. It got me into a car and down to a pharmacy and eventually into a new apartment with my name on the lease. But anger that stays too long starts to cost you the same way everything else does. I let it do its job, and then I let it go. What I kept instead was the thing I'd actually learned, which is that good judgment and a clear head are things you build, not things you're given. I had to look at a bank statement I'd been avoiding for 22 months before I could see my own life clearly. That's not a failure of intelligence. That's what happens when your loyalty outpaces your discernment. The two have to move together. You can be a kind person and still read the fine print. You can love your family and still close a joint account. The other thing I kept was something harder to name, a kind of steadiness I didn't have before, not toughness. More like the feeling of standing on ground that actually holds. I take my medication at the same time every night. I update my budget on Sunday mornings. I live in an apartment where every transaction is one I made. These aren't grand acts, but they're mine. And that turns out to matter more than I knew. My neurologist told me at my 3-month follow-up that consistency is one of the most underrated forms of self-respect. She meant it clinically about treatment adherence, but I wrote it down anyway because it felt like it applied to more than the medication. Consistency. Clarity. The willingness to keep going even when the ground has shifted. That's what got me out of that house. That's what gets most people out of most things, I think. Not a single brave moment, but a long sequence of small ones, each one slightly more honest than the last. I kept driving. I had somewhere to be, and for the first time in years, it was somewhere I'd chosen.